Well, hello, Nate. Look at this. We got
Hello,
you
Greg.
back.
We figured it out. We're on Facebook. I'm back. Everything's coming up. Roses here at the end of spring migration. Welcome, everybody, to our increasingly misnamed bi-weekly What's This Bird program where we talk about birds and bird identification together with our ABA community. Greg, how are things in Chicago? I know we've got some exciting birds here planned. We'll do a little bit of a vamping before we explain exactly how all this is supposed to work to people who might be new. But hello, everybody. How are you doing?
Yeah, Len Kopka on Facebook says hi. So part of how this works is we're watching the comments. So if you guys have anything that you want to say or a question,
live.
Just jump in there in the comments and let us know what you're thinking.
Yeah, so folks who might be curious, I guess, if you're first timers, you'll enjoy this explanation. If you are not, then you will tolerate this explanation. What the AVA does is we have a number of Facebook groups, social media, one of which is called What's This Bird? It's a bird identification community where people can post photos of birds that they have seen out in the field or at their feeders or wherever they might encounter a bird, and our friendly bird identification community will identify that bird for them and maybe teach them a little bit about bird identification. But as we do, we get some birds that require a little bit more thought, a little bit more explanation, birds that might be not the best birds for talking about in the internet space, and that's where Greg and I come in every couple weeks, ideally, to talk about some of the birds that have popped up on those spaces and walk through some of those identifications to the best of our ability.
Well,
So
yeah,
you
pretty much
works.
Yeah, you wrap that all up nice and neat. We've got Gavin, Chris, Jared, and Christy all saying hello.
Jared Clark, recent ABA podcast guest. You can check out the most recent episode where he talks about the incredible rarity phenomenon that Newfoundland gets every year. It seems like every spring, and it's always very interesting. It's occasionally exceptional. And he talks a little bit about that. Of course, you can hear Jared's delightful Newfoundland dialect, which is always a pleasure. It's like this weird combination of an Irish brogue and a Canadian dialect. It's fun to listen to.
Yeah, so spring is sprung here. We had
we're summer here.
We're summer here too. Everything's fully leafed out. It was 91 degrees last week. It felt like the end of July. But there's still birds moving through. They're harder to see. But it's interesting when the flowers bloom early for us before the warblers and mostly the warblers, but other migrants too. Before they get here,
think about it, it's flycatcher season.
Well, yes, and precisely. But if the flowers are done, the birds just keep moving. And so, they'll pop in for a day and then they're gone. If the flowers are hanging, if it's cold, the birds linger much longer and you get better concentrations of them. But yeah, we had a good spring. I wouldn't call it spectacular or anything like that, but it was a good spring. Shorebirds were great.
Yeah, the ABA held our the first in-person staff retreat that we've had in more than a decade in Chicago a couple of weeks ago, and we did get to do some birding. So I feel like I have experienced now spring on the Chicago lakefront, and it's fun. It's good birding. It's good birding.
It is.
Black-billed cuckoo. It's
that day,
the highlight. Golden-winged warbler. We had a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ABA group checklist had a total of about 89 species or something like that.
Correct.
The total for Montrose Point that day was 133.
We did well,
which is pretty darn sweet. Got people saying that the cicadas are ratcheting up.
You are lucky. Like I was hoping. We are kind of where I live is sort of in the middle of one of the broods, and they have been extremely spotty around here. There are parts to the west of me and parts to the east of me that are getting some cicadas, but I have not heard any where I am, not yet. I suppose there's still a
Yeah,
chance.
they're
And I'm
spotty
not
around
inclined to go
here.
drive around to go look for cicadas. I'm not going to twitch a cicada, but yeah,
Yeah, they're
yeah,
spotty around
I'm
here,
jealous.
but I have to wonder if some of that has to do with the ash trees being gone in the
Mm.
time in the last 17 years, the number of ash trees that have just been decimated by emerald ash borer. And
I remember, I guess it was about 12, 15 years ago when we had the last big cicada outbreak. I could look at my eBird checklist and figure it out. But we, I remember going to some places where there are tons of cicadas, and I wonder if some of those places where cicadas have come up have been kind of paved over, and so the
yeah,
cicadas are coming out, and they're heating a cap of concrete now, and they just can't get out, and that's sort of causing them
well,
to
but
decline a little bit over periods of time.
they survive underground by being
Hmm.
literally hooked into a tree root that they
Yeah.
drink the sap for 17 years. So like around here we had, like I said, a lot of ash trees, and they're all gone.
Mhm.
They're all dead. And the cicadas that were hooked into those trees, I presume, would be dead too.
Yeah, that'd be dead too.
Um,
Yeah.
But we've had some in the last one. We had I'm along the river here, and ring-billed gulls were in the treetops feeding, like
Oh
not
yeah.
not a few, like hundreds of ring-billed gulls were in the tops of these trees and like in the trees feeding on cicadas.
Yeah.
It was really something to see.
I remember seeing red-headed woodpeckers and great-crested flycatchers absolutely going nuts around a particularly dense brood or intensely dense concentration of cicadas
Yeah.
coming out. I'm sure they did very, very well that year.
So why don't we get into the birds?
Yeah, let's talk birds, not cicadas. I couldn't
Let's
identify a
talk
cicada.
birds. But before we
But
do,
first.
but first, a message from your sponsor.
Probably could have
No,
made a better segue there.
come on. Um, we are currently running our nesting season fundraising appeal, and if you guys like all the things that we do and appreciate things like our Young Birder program and this broadcast and the podcast, which is I think the best natural history podcast out there, our
Certainly better than
magazines
all the
and
Bigfoot podcasts.
all of it. Please consider giving to our nesting season appeal. You can see the URL there on the screen. It is gifts from folks like you that make it possible for us to do all of this stuff, and we
That is
very
true.
much appreciate it.
Yep. aba.org/nesting season. Please give today or tomorrow or presumably sometime in the next week or so.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. All right. Let's talk about the
Well,
birds
let's-
for real this time, Greg.
Yeah, so this first one we get a lot, and
Amorphous porch blob.
a porch blob. This is from Texas, and if you've ever run into this, you know exactly what it is, but it always messes with people. They have no idea what the heck this thing is when they find it. It's in their garages, inside their porches.
This is one of the photos that I get most commonly from non-birding friends and relatives. When they find this thing underneath their eave. I've had people
Yeah.
say when they've gotten photos that show the feet, like the talons are huge. It must be some sort of hawk. Like how many hawks?
Yeah,
have
well,
been that
all right, we're
small?
gonna
I feel
cut-
Like certainly size is difficult to determine in photos sometimes, but
It is.
I feel like
It
that is not
And-
hawk sized.
No, this is a little bird that can easily sit in your cupped hand.
Jeez, you could fit like 5 or 6 of them in your.
Yeah. So let's just cut to the chase on this one. This is a sleeping Carolina wren, and they will go into structures, and they fluff up their rumps, and hidden at the base of their rump feathers are all these white spots, and they tuck their head under, and there you have it. You see this fluffy white spotted thing sitting up in your rafters in your porch. Well, that's what it is. It's a sleeping Carolina wren.
Yeah, they tend to that longish tail is a good indicator too. I don't think people realize that wrens have tails quite like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
excuse me. I'm out of practice. Yeah, and so, people may be familiar with the wrens around their house. They're quite loud, they're quite conspicuous. They probably enjoy the friendly wrens that are, making their nests in whatever, cavity that they can
Mm-hmm.
find their way into, cable boxes, underneath decks, garages. I had a couple of them fledged from my garage this year. Um, and they don't see those spots on the rump because the birds typically do not fluff them up like that. Nor and, when you're watching that bird during the day, and it
Right.
can be very confusing. But
Yeah. No,
once you know, you know.
I have never. I mean, all the Carolina wrens I've seen, I have never seen the white spots on the rump, except for the one or two times I've seen them sleeping. So
Yeah, for sure. So
yeah.
and interestingly, Lynn
No, keep
Kopka
going.
points out in the comments, never seen a house wren roosting like this. That's true. I've never seen any
Yep.
other wren roosting like that other than Carolina wren. That's the only one.
Yeah, well, house wrens they like to stay in their little holes. Carolina wrens they
No, is
build
that right?
more open nests.
Yeah.
They still use stuff but they kind of they're kind of like house sparrows in the way they.
Oh, that's a big old disheveled
It's just a
nest that
big
is
old
kind of half
yeah.
opened. Yeah.
So this one comes to us from northern Illinois, and I'd say it's pretty obviously a sandpiper. And judging by the sticks in the mud, I'd say it's a pretty small one. So
Yeah,
looks like
this is the classic sandpiper, your calidris. That is the genus of small sandpipers that are found all around the world.
mm-hmm.
In North America, we have a number of species that we tend to refer to as peeps, and they can cause a lot of identification headaches for a lot of people. They frequently want to they frequently throw up their hands sometimes. But this is a great photo. You can get a lot of clues about what this bird is from this photo. Typically, when you see one of these sandpipers, they can be quite distant across a mud flat,
Yeah.
several hundred meters across, and it can be a little more difficult. But there's a lot going on in this bird, and we can pretty confidently come to a conclusion about what it is.
Yeah, it's the plumage is sort of in the middle. I can see some new feathers coming in there, a little bit of
Yeah,
rusty color on the
it's a little
back, a little bit of
brownish.
rusty
Yeah.
color in the face. There's a lot of older feathers that are worn, the grayish across the wing panel.
Hmm.
Um, it's got a very whitish breast. Overall, it's
Yep.
just kind of a gray and white looking thing.
Yeah.
Short primaries. We can see the tail sticking
Hmm.
out
The
there
tail sticks
beyond the
out. Yes, that
primaries.
rules out Baird sandpiper and white rump sandpiper for sure,
Yeah,
right
I
off the
mean,
bat.
if you want, what we can do here is I can go to the next slide and we can identify this bird, but then compare it to the similars.
Sure. Before we do that, I do
Yep,
want to sort of point out some things. Like, what do you look for when you're trying to identify a peep? We talked about wing projection, primary projection, like how far those wings stick out beyond the tail. But what are the sort of things that you are looking at when you're trying to identify this bird before we move on to the
sure.
composite? As for me, it's leg color. That's always a classic one.
Yep,
And for this one, we've got very muddy legs, and so that
yes,
makes things a little bit more difficult. And bill size and shape, there is not a ton going on this bird, which is an identification point in and of itself.
yeah.
But it's a relatively stout bill that kind of curves slightly downward. Those are all things to note when you're looking at those birds. What do you see, Greg?
Pretty much. I mean, pretty much the same. The primary
Hmm.
the primary length is key.
Hmm.
Primary. The leg color is very important. There are two sandpiper species that look something like this
Hmm.
that have yellow legs, and the rest all have dark legs.
Yep.
This picture is a little confusing because the mud is giving it kind of a greenish reflection
Very
on
shiny. Yeah.
what appears to be dark legs. You can see where it's
Hmm.
dry upper above the joint that it's kind of a dark gray.
Hmm.
And then, as
Yeah.
you said, the bill here, again, as you said, kind of stout with kind of a thick tip.
Hmm.
And the thick tip is kind of key in identifying this bird.
Yep,
So
I would
let's
agree.
compare all of the peeps that one might find
The five
reasonably.
common species of peeps
Yeah, the five most common species of peeps, and our bird that we are trying to
is one of
identify
these,
is one of these. Yes. Um,
not one of the rare peeps.
Not one of the rare peeps. And you'll notice the bird at the lower right, semi-palmated sandpiper, has all of the things that we were talking about. It's
Mhm.
got a pretty much whitish chest. It's got a stout bill with kind of a thick tip. It's got that. It's got the short wings that just come to the tip of the tail, and it has dark legs. And looking at so going up from that semi-palmated sandpiper, we have a white rump sandpiper, and you'll notice how much longer the wings are. The wings stick
Very
out.
long, very
They
pointy.
stick out beyond the tail, and the primaries themselves are visible. Which you'll notice in the other ones, the tertials are really long and lay on top of the primaries,
Mhm.
and you really don't see the primaries. And that's a good thing to look for when you're looking at peeps. In the lower left-hand corner, we have the other long-winged peep. Again, you can see how long those wings are sticking out the back. And the Baird sandpiper is pretty easily identifiable in all plumages. It's got those long wings and it's really scaly. You see how the back pattern
Yeah.
is really these fine scales. But also look at the bill shape and size on all of these birds, and you'll notice that they're all subtly different.
hmm Another thing to
If,
note about certainly Baird sandpiper and white rump sandpiper, a little bit to an extent, is sort of where you see them on the mud flat is also an important indicator of
Absolutely.
what the species is. It's not, one of those cut and dried things that you can always depend on, but it's one of those soft field marks that if that's what it's doing, it sort of leans you in that direction. Semi-palmated sandpiper is a bird that's going to be out on the mud. They like to be in the mud. That's why their legs are frequently so muddy, as in the bird we're trying to identify here. Baird sandpiper is a grass piper, so they really like to be on the short grass. So if you've got like a mud flat that perhaps has been dry for a long period of time, such that the grass starts to come up on the mud flat and is quite short, those are the places that you're going to look for Baird sandpiper. And that's not to say that Baird sandpiper can't be out in the mud as well. They
Yeah.
do frequently sometimes, but
And during
for the
migration,
by yeah, all bets are off for the most
yeah,
part. But for the most part, Baird sandpiper is going to be a bit more of an upland bird, going to be sort of on the grassy edges of the mud flat rather than actually in the mud itself, like semi palmated, at least western, and white rumped somewhat.
yeah. Len asks about are these all in the same plumage stage?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Roughly,
More or less.
yes.
Yeah.
But we're going to focus more on structure here because the plumage of spring peeps can be really,
Yeah, it can
as
be
I pointed out in the
variable.
original picture. There's a lot going on with the molt. There's a lot of held over feathers.
Yeah, they really keep that nice, clean, rusty plumage that you see for a relatively short period of time,
Yeah,
because their breeding season is so short. I mean, these are birds that are going all the way up to the tundra, and you've only got 6 to 8 weeks of breeding season, if that, and you've got to get there, get the eggs on the ground, to get the chicks out as fast as possible, and then head back down south again.
exactly. And so again, getting back to the bills, you'll see the Lee sandpiper in the middle with the smallest, finest little decurved bill. And what Nate was saying about habitat, Lee sandpiper feeds differently than the
Mm-hmm.
others.
They
Usually,
move
you'll find
differently
it
too.
you'll find it at the grassy edges, and it kind of creeps around like a mouse.
Yeah, one of the
Um,
things that really stood out to me in the photo that we're identifying here, the original photo, is how tall the bird is standing.
yeah,
That bird has got its legs like fully extended. It's very tall. Lee sandpiper never does that. Like Lee
right,
sandpiper is a little crouchy mouse bird that likes to like that's got a very kind of acute angle with its heel. What is that? That's like the ankle joint of a bird,
yeah,
the backwards knee. And they will sit like right on top of the mud and like creep around like little mice. It's very distinctive in a way that you can identify least sandpiper in particular from pretty far away.
Absolutely. And they have yellow legs on top of that. They're the only
That
one of
helps too.
these
They can be
this
mud
group
covered,
that
but you
has
do see
yellow
some yellow.
legs.
Yeah.
White rump is kind of in between semi-palmated and maybe, some of the like Baird's and least. It's got a finely tipped bill compared to semi-palmated, a little bit of a decurve shape to it.
Mm-hmm.
If you can see it, it has a little reddish patch at the base of the lower mandible,
Yeah,
which
close enough. Yep.
is, if you can get close enough, if you can see it, if it's in good light, if it's not covered in mud, that's a slam dunk field mark. There's only two of our brown sandpipers that have that, and that's pectoral sandpiper and white rumped. And pectoral is such a much bigger bird that there shouldn't be too much confusion there.
It's
Plus
funny.
it has
Pectoral is
plus it
actually a
has
very
yellow
small
legs.
bird.
Plus it has yellow
It's
legs.
like you see a pectoral sandpiper next to a killdeer, and a killdeer looks freaking massive.
Yeah,
But compared to these peeps, pectoral is like a giant. Even though it's
exactly.
actually quite small.
And so,
It's
and
funny
again,
thing about peeps.
the white rump, like Baird's, has the attenuated shape. It's also got some streaking that comes down onto the flank,
Yeah, they tend to be pretty
which is
streaky.
kind of
Yep.
unique.
Chevrons.
And then we get to the western with its comically big bill. Most of them look like the bill is kind of made out of putty and just shoved on the face there.
Yeah. Another thing to think about semi-palmated and Western, I don't know if you've encountered this, Greg, is that they tend to feed differently too.
Yeah.
And that's based on, that bill. Semi-palmated will pick at things right at its toes. So it will kind of move around and kind of pick right in front of it. Whereas Western sandpiper has that big old bill. They always feel like they're reaching. They're reaching far out in front of them to grab stuff. Again, not a cut and dried
And
thing, but one of those soft field marks that you can kind of rely on to give you a hint in the right direction.
Exactly, and they tend to do that kind of almost Dowager like sewing machine action when
Yeah,
they're
they
feeding.
will. Oh, they got a big old bill. Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll do that too. Yep.
And then lastly, on the Western sandpiper, you can see the field mark that is most often,
Oh, yeah.
that's always pointed out in the field guides, and that is the rusty braces, the rusty lines of
Big,
scapular feathers going along the
Reddish
back.
line on its back. Yeah.
Exactly. So there. Hope.
So,
hope you
so
stayed
can
with
we
us
identify
through
our
all of
original
that.
bird now?
Yes,
Go
well, I
back
thought
to
we
our
did.
original
It's a
bird?
semi.
Oh,
yes,
it's a semi-palmated
This
sandpiper.
is a
This is
semi-palmated
classic,
sandpiper.
about as classic as they come, honestly.
Classic semi-palmated sandpiper. And
The
that
one-
is the
one
bird at
peep
the lower
without
right
field
there.
marks.
Yeah,
But that is the field mark.
that is the field mark. Okay, so
All right. This is
every time we do this, I try to find a bird that I think Nate and I are not going to agree on, or at least maybe not a hundo. So I think this is it.
Yeah.
This comes from Superior, Wisconsin. It's a reddish finch, and
Hemorrhoids.
there's three reddish finches that are in Wisconsin. One is pine grosbeak, which we can just say this is not for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
And then the other two, which are again sort of a perennial problem for people, and that's house finch and purple finch. So take it away.
I don't like this bird, Greg. This does things to my brain that I'm not comfortable with. So when I first pulled it out, my immediate response, my gut response was house finch, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
The bill looks relatively decurved on the upper culmen, the upper edge of the bird. Typically, house finch has kind of a curved upper bill, makes the bill look a little bit blunted. Purple finch has a more straight culmen, makes the bill look kind of sharp. I like the broad streaks on the flank for house finch. I think that is a trait that both of them can have, but by and large, it is more predominant on house finches. Here's some things I do not like for a house finch. It's very bright. This is an extremely bright, rich colored bird, and that's not to say that house finches this time of year cannot be extremely bright like this, but I have not typically seen them this deep red, purple. And as you pointed out, Greg, the primary projection is wonky for house finch. It looks awfully long. Those wings look like they're stretching, halfway down the tail. That's kind of weird for house finch, and it is more in line with purple finch, which is a nomadic finch that travels long distances. Birds that travel long distances tend to have longer wings than birds that are more sedentary. So, I am baffled, frankly, still by this bird because it does not fit me for either of them. If I had to make a choice, I would probably say house, but I am not in any way certain about that identification. And I have some suspicions that I can save till the end about this bird. But I will let you take it away now.
So I feel pretty comfortable calling this a purple finch.
Okay.
And here's why. One, the raspberry color itself
Sure.
is
Very
different
rich. Yep.
than house finch, which tends to be more reddish than that
I
that
agree.
raspberry color. The primary projection, which you pointed out, that's
It's
structural
weird.
and that is typical. You see the purple finch on the right here has those long primaries compared to the house finch on the left, which does not. The wing panel. This bird has a dark wing panel with that reddish tone in the wing covert fringes
Yep. No, I
and the
agree.
primary fringes themselves and the tertials. House finch always has whitish or grayish, and it just, if there's any color in the wing panel, that's that and the primary length really, for me, nail it as a purple finch. And I included this purple finch on the right and made it a little bit bigger so you could see it a little better. But look at how curved the culmen looks on this bird because of the angle, the way it's foreshortened. And I think that there's a bit of that happening with the bird in the middle, is that the bill is angled towards us a little bit, and it's making that culmen look more curved than it really is.
I think that could be at play here, no doubt. Some things that still bother me for purple finch are the brown streaks on the side. I don't think I've ever seen a purple finch that shows that much brown streaking all the way down the side. And I'm not seeing a ton of purplish color in the flight feathers. There's a little, but it's really brown, and I don't know whether or not that's my monitor or camera effects, which absolutely could be playing a role here.
Mm-hmm.
But like it just doesn't quite work with my conception of purple finch, and
Yeah.
that could be just me. I wonder, and I hate throwing the H bomb out there. But I wonder if this isn't a hybrid, because it does seem to show some traits that kind of fit in the middle of both purple and house finch. Herpel. I almost said herpel, which would be a good
You
indicator
did say
of
Herpel,
this bird.
actually.
A herpel finch, or house finch, whatever you prefer, puce finch. Um, I don't know. I tried to find some photos of house times purple hybrids, and even those seem kind of weird to me. Like, I don't know if those can be absolutely confirmed. There are some on eBird,
Yeah.
but they do show, a longer primary projection, but still an overall kind of housey look. I don't know. I'm not comfortable either way with this bird, to be honest, and I could be convinced either way. But based on what I see here, I would like to see some more photos to convince me one way or the other. This is the only photo we have of this bird. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, unfortunately. Take more
And
photos, people. Put that camera in burst mode and shoot away, because these birds need more. We need to see more on this thing. I am. I don't know. I could lean purple. Like I could. You make good points, but
I
I
mean,
don't know.
I have seen purple finches with streaking on the flanks, not maybe quite this bold, but
Mm-hmm.
getting pretty close to that.
Maybe
Um,
so. John
but
Anderson asked a good question. Are there differences in eastern
yeah,
versus western purple finch? That could be happening too. I know that purple finches in the west have thrown me in the past. Our friend Alvaro Jaramillo believes they to be completely different species that should be split at some point.
yeah, I can pull out the
Yeah, I
Sibley
don't know.
here
There, I
and
think there is a
refresh
precedent
my.
for hybridization. I mean, these two birds are pretty closely related. And the photos on eBird that I found um, are from a bird in the Midwest from Ohio, which would fit. There's northern Midwest birds. It's in a place where both of these species could be found. Um, I don't know. I don't know. I'm going to
Yeah,
be
so
non-committal.
the western birds actually have shorter primaries,
Hmm. That could be.
and more
There are a lot.
raspberry
There are a lot. Yeah, I know the Western birds are way more
and
raspberry.
smaller bills.
That's interesting to note. There have been a lot of Western vagrants coming out
Yeah,
of the Great Basin this spring so far. Black rosy finch in Minnesota, varied bunting in Wisconsin. That's not out of line that this could be a Western purple finch there too. That just kind of flies under the radar because people aren't
yeah,
looking for it. That
yeah,
could be an option too. Interesting bird for sure.
yeah. I don't know if
Chrissy
you've
Esmond had asked
noticed.
about the face pattern. People are trying to point out on the face pattern. I don't know that there's a lot that can be
I
determined there.
mean,
There's not a
the
lot,
face pattern I
not a lot
think
there.
looks more purple finch than house finch.
I
Um,
would possibly be in line with that. Yeah,
I
I
don't know
could
if
agree.
you've
I could
noticed
go
how
with
dark it's gotten behind me,
that.
but
Yeah, is it
I am
getting some
I'm
rain?
about to get hit by a pretty good thunderstorm.
No, if we
It's
lose
like almost
this,
dark as night out here right now.
huh?
Um,
Beautiful. It's beautiful, right?
yeah, so
Looking out my window.
we're gonna have to leave. We're gonna have to leave that one
We're
where
gonna
it is.
leave it.
But
I could buy Western purple finch. I don't think it looks like an Eastern purple finch. Western purple
okay,
finch is. I I could go with that if we're not going hybrid here. So I would like more photos. I want more photos.
I would need more pictures and more evidence that it's a hybrid.
Fair enough. Yeah,
I'm
sure.
not seeing
Yeah, why not?
anything that makes me want to drop the H bomb. Um,
Not Harry Truman over
all
here.
right, this next one comes to us from Indiana. And
Indiana.
this is the kind of picture. It's like if you're familiar with this species, you know exactly what it is right away. No, I mean even though this picture is terrible and it's blown up but if you know this bird, you know what it is right away. So what do you think there, Nate?
It's a yellow warbler. Lowercase,
No, it's
lowercase
not.
yellow, lowercase y, lowercase w. It's a yellow warbler. We have a lot of yellow warblers. Lowercase version, not common noun.
Why
Not
isn't
proper
it a
noun.
goldfinch?
Oh boy. It doesn't have wing bars for
Well,
starters.
there you go. There you go. And
And
the wings aren't
the
really
wings
black.
are
They're kind of
they're
grayish.
gray and not black. Yep, correct. It doesn't feel like a goldfinch. Goldfinch has a very distinctive shape. Are big-bodied, short-tailed, relatively small-headed. This bird has a largest body, but it's sort of shaped differently. It's very
Yep.
shouldery, and it's got a short tail, but the head is way bigger than what I would expect on any goldfinch. Goldfinch has a
Yeah.
little teeny bitty, teeny tiny
And
head.
goldfinch also has a different color. It's a very lemony yellow. This is a very rich kind of golden looking
Yeah,
yellow.
I agree with that. Yep.
Um,
Yeah, so we're talking warblers, I guess. Here, there are a few of them that are up. Pine warbler, maybe. Pine warbler, even at its brightest, is not this bright on the head.
no.
Blue-winged warbler, perhaps. Prothonotary warbler. Those are the two that need to be discussed.
So let's look at those two. Um,
Look at
I
that segue. That's professional TV right there.
hey, it's there's a reason we're doing this
That's
every
right.
other week. Um,
Mostly.
yeah. um, it's a prothonotary warbler,
Yep,
and
it is.
there's no question about that.
Prothonotory.
The bird on the left has that bright golden head and the bluish gray wings and tail. This bird on the left, it's flashing the white, which you can see. In a prothonotary warbler, when you're watching it, they always flash that white tail.
Yeah.
They flick it open. It's on the ground, which is someplace you see prothonotary warblers fairly frequently, and never see blue-winged warblers
They're pretty low.
unless they're in
Like a bird,
like a puddle, which they
fountain or
love.
water.
They
Yeah.
love puddles. But also note how green the blue-winged warbler is all the way up to the top of the head.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the blue-winged warbler has
Yep.
a yellow face and breast, but
Mm-hmm.
the whole back is greenish, and there's really no greenish on a prothonotary warbler.
No, it's pretty much all bright yellow, and certainly the back as well. You would expect to see some greenish in the rump area here, on,
yeah.
excuse me, on our bird, and that is just not the case. So prothonotary warbler definitely, they are so bright and so yellow. They are the yellowest of our yellow warblers, without doubt. Golden,
Yes, so the
almost.
bird in question there is a prothonotary warbler.
Prothonotary, not a warbler.
So this is not a warbler, comes from Oklahoma. Um, I think that based on what it's sitting on, looks like some sort of a rope or a fence.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a small bird. It's got a kind of a chunky conical bill and a brown
Mm-hmm.
streaky thing. So I think we can go pretty much straight to sparrows.
Yep, New World sparrows. Lot of light in this photo. It's a little bit blown out, so I think it's fair to say this is an open country bird as well, because there are no shadows at all
Yeah.
in this photo. Um,
So
yeah, very
what do you see
pale,
here?
and I mean I think it's pale even though the photo here is blown out. This is a pretty pale sparrow. The shape is interesting to me. It's kind of very chesty, large head. Pretty big bill for a sparrow, pinkish
Yep,
bill. I think that's pretty accurate on the color there.
I think so.
Tail looks pretty long. So
Mm-hmm.
there are a couple different open country sparrows that immediately come to mind with me. Um, and that is Savannah sparrow and Vesper sparrow, both of which I would expect to be in Elk City, Oklahoma. I'm not sure exactly where in Oklahoma Elk City is, but both of them are open country birds throughout the middle of the continent. Um,
Well,
so things
let's
to
look at
think about.
those.
Yeah,
Let's
the
look at those
pattern
and
in the
throw
face
Bairds
is the
in for
big thing
fun.
here. Okay, Bairds. I never think about Bairds.
Oklahoma during migration. That's
All right, fair
possible.
enough.
Um,
Lynn Kopka points out blue-winged warblers nest on the ground, so they do go on the ground too. There you go. I didn't know that.
yeah,
Anyway,
but
goes back to the
when
bird
you
before.
yeah, all right. If you yes, if you get them at their nest, but um, okay, back to our sparrows. Um, so the bird in question is at the lower left, and then we've got a Baird's, a Vesper, and a Savannah, and I feel pretty confident that the bird in question is a Vesper sparrow.
I agree with you on this. I have no issue with that identification. Things that come out to me is just the kind of the general overall paleness of this
Yep.
bird. Baird sparrow has kind of that tan, kind of khaki wash across the face, and even though this photo is blown out a fair bit, I think that we would be able to see that. And Savannah sparrow is similar. It's got kind of an olive brown tan wash and frequently some yellow in the
Mm-hmm.
lore between the bill and the eye, as you can see in the composite here. I think that we would see that even in a blown out photo here. And also structurally, Savannah sparrow is quite different. It's got a very short
Short,
tail,
kind of
and that is something that does stand out to
compact.
you. Exactly, very compact, small head, short tail. This is a bigger headed bird with a longer tail. I have no problem going with Vesper sparrow on this guy.
Yeah, a couple of other things to point out is the wing coverts, the wing bar there. You can see the bird on the left, lower left, the bird in
Mm-hmm.
question. It's got the blackish coverts with heavy white fringe, which
Yep.
you would never see on a Baird sparrow.
Mm-hmm.
So that and the streaking that goes all the way down the flank to the undertail coverts, that rules out Bairds. The shape rules out Savannah. And you can see the Vesper has kind of a weird sort of a dogleg shaped malar stripe. It's got
Mm-hmm.
this like takes a little curve, and you
Yeah.
can see that in the bird in question with
For
that
sure.
that funky, almost long spur like face pattern.
Yeah, John Anderson in the comments correctly points out the white eye ring on the Vesper sparrow, and that is a great field mark.
It
You
is,
certainly
but
see
we
it in
don't see it on the
composition
bird
here.
on the
It's
left
hard to
because
see
of
in
the
bird in
photo.
question. In the photo is not great. But had the photo been a tad sharper, absolutely something that we'd have seen, or that or not quite as blown out. Definitely something you would see. It's something you see in the field through binoculars. Absolutely.
Yeah, and also the bird's state of molt, because Vesper sparrows only molt once a year in August. And so they tend to, by spring, summer, that color that we see on the Vesper sparrow comes from the feathers wearing down, and it reveals the rufous shoulder and some of the other pattern. If you look at photos of them over the course of the year, they look really different from, April to September, August.
Yeah, this bird's looking a little worse for wear. It's hard work being out in the sun all day.
Yeah, it is.
It really wears you down.
So, yes, we have, sorry, allergies. We have a Vesper sparrow here at lower left. And this,
I thought we were done with gull. It's spring. It's not gull season, Greg.
Oh, this was taken just this last week. It's always gull season. It's always gull season. All right, what do you seeing here, Nate?
I'm seeing a pretty stocky, large gull. It's one of our larger Laris gulls. Definitely not one of the little black-headed gulls. I am looking at things that it's similar to shorebirds, right? So tails, wing projection, bill. Those are some of the things you want to look at here. I'm seeing dark legs, but not like overly dark. They look kind of, I don't know, gunmetal gray, maybe a little bit. I don't know. I'm not a color person. Long wings. Those wings are very long for a lot of gulls. And pretty hefty size all black bill on this bird. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't strike me as so some of the large white-headed gulls to think about, ring-billed gull in Florida, ring-billed gull, herring gull. Those are probably the two that we're gonna talk about most here.
Well, actually, I don't think so. Because first of all, let's age this. Let's age this bird. This bird is a first going into second cycle bird.
Baby gull.
So it's a young bird. And the combination of sort of the if you squint at the screen, you get a hint of what the adult plumage might be like. So it really it's got a dark back and a whitish head, and this all black bill, and the primary projection. All of that kind of adds up to one of the blackback gulls, and we can. A herring gull.
Once you get there, it gets a little easy. Yeah, herring gull is going to be like dark all over, right? Like
it's going to be darker. It's going to be darker all over especially it's going to be much more patterned on the back. It's not going to be as dark and smudgy as this bird is. And but if we get to the two blackback gulls, which is what the poster, the person who posted this photo was asking about.
Well, once you get there.
Yeah. So the bird in question is a lesser blackback gull, and there it is at the top left. And comparing it to great blackback gull usually has more of a checkerboard pattern in first cycle, and going into
those young birds.
Going into second cycle, it's got a much usually just like snow white head, but that massive meat cleaver of a bill,
deep and long, and that is a big bill. And even though that lesser blackback gull does look a little bit larger build than some lesser blackbacks I've seen, it's not near what you would expect on a great blackback gull, which is an absolute brute of a gull with a huge deep bill.
Absolutely. There's a third great blackback gull that I threw down in the bottom. He's a little small. I had to fit him in there, but again, you can see just how that huge honking bill sticks out there, and the pattern is muddy on the back. The feather wear. I mean, you can see the feather shafts sticking out there. This bird is very worn, which is typical of birds in May and June in Florida. Well, just about anywhere. We see them in the Great Lakes too, where their feathers are just beat up like crazy,
barely hanging on.
Yeah. And it's an interesting time to try to identify gulls, because they can look like anything, and that's where you have to really worry about structure. And
Yeah,
that
structure is one of those things that's kind of everyone has their terms to kind of talk about it, especially in terms of goal. And I'm gonna kind of throw this back to the shorebirds that we talked about a little bit before. And that lesser blackback gull reminds me a lot of Baird sandpiper, white rump sandpiper. It's a very kind of classy looking gull, very svelte, kind of narrow through the back half of it, and kind of ending in those very long kind of elegant wings, whereas great blackback gull is just, I mean, it's huge for starters. It's the size of a
is the
red-tailed
biggest
hawk. I don't
gull.
know if people realize that. And it is just stocky and thick all through the bird. You can see how that lesser blackback gull compared to the great blackback gull on the top almost kind of tapers a little bit more towards the back, so that it's almost like a, I don't know, like a comma or something,
Yeah, and
whereas the great blackback gull is pretty thick all the way through.
it's pretty it's more noticeable against, so like the primary projection and the sort of attenuated shape is more
Hmm.
useful in lesser blackback versus herring.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh, for sure, because they're similar size. Yeah.
right, and as you can see, the great blackback gull down there in the bottom, it's molting, its feathers are beat to dirt. It actually looks kind of slim and leggy,
Hmm.
and they can do that, but but you can't get past that monster bill,
The bill.
and
The
they
shape
just
of the
all
head too. The great blackback gull has a very thick head, similar to a glaucous gull, like those, which is also a very large gull.
yes,
The size of the eye compared, placed on the head is very distinct for those very large gulls that maybe you don't notice in the field because the whole size of the bird is so much larger than some of the other birds that might be flocking with. But it's a useful thing to notice in these sort of situations when you get sort of one-off photos. And also, one of the things that people point to for lesser blackback gull is sort of the smudgy, running mascara look that they have around the
yeah,
eye. And this lesser blackback gull doesn't have a ton of it, but it still has that smoky eye there compared to the very clean face on the great blackback gulls for the most part.
yeah, yeah. And if we go
And
back
that
to this photo, um, the one other thing that we can see, and this is extremely subtle, but it's something that I see on a lot of lesser blackback gulls that are subadult birds as they age. They have this black bill. If you see a young bird with a black bill without any pink at the base or anything, that's gonna take your mind to the blackback gulls versus a herring gull,
hmm
or ring-billed, for that matter. But you'll notice how this bird is starting to get a little sort of yellowish horn color at the very tip.
hmm
And
hmm
lesser blackback gulls, they get this weird sort of yellowish, almost orangish
Yeah.
tip to the bill that goes up the culmen, goes up the ridge, and it's a really it's really unique. And this bird is just starting to get that.
Andrew Haffenden points out with terms in terms of shape, the Nike swoosh. That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and that
absolutely.
that kind of smudgy eye thing is something that lesser blackback gulls have almost all plumages except for like full adult breeding plumage.
Yeah,
Anytime they change from that at all, they're going to start showing dark feathers around the eye. Um, but in full adult breeding plumage, they look. You got other things to look at. You don't need to look at the eye.
and then of course as they get older, the leg color changes too, so that when they
Yeah,
you
it'd be
know when
bright
they
yellow.
get to near adult to adult, they have yellow legs versus great blackback, which always has pink legs.
Yeah, flesh color or yeah, pinkish.
So I think with 10 minutes to go, I think we've gone through our birds. So
We
you
did it.
guys, if you've got anything that you want to talk about,
Well, while we let you guys think about that, we also will throw another reminder that we are in the middle of our nesting season appeal. If you would like to donate to the American Birding Association, you can go to aba.org/nesting appeal. Is it nesting appeal or nesting
nesting
season? I
season.
forget. Nesting season. Thank you for that. And also, we are a membership organization. Please consider joining the ABA to help us out through all this. Members get a lot of really cool stuff. A lot of really cool stuff these days. Not only do you get our wonderful magazines, but you get access to ABA community, you get access to the publications archive, you get access to NARBA, which for those of you who have been birding
Yep.
for a long time will know what that means. It's the North American Rare Bird Alert. It used to be a subscription service. Now it's folded into the ABA and is an ABA member benefit. So,
Absolutely.
you get a lot out of an ABA membership. So aba.org/join. Please consider joining and saying that What's This Bird brought you there too. Just to make us feel good.
Yeah, we look at that stuff, and I pat Nate on the back,
Puts
and
a little
he'll
smile on your face.
pat me on the back occasionally.
When we're together.
Yeah. So unless anybody in the comments has anything they want us to talk about or answer, I know Nate, you've got to run.
I gotta run. I gotta go pick up a kid at school.
So I think we're gonna probably end this one just a little bit earlier than usual.
Well, thanks, folks. We'll be back in a couple weeks. Hopefully, knock on wood.
Yep.
And we will be back talking about birds in the summer, which will probably be a lot of baby birds and a lot of really nasty looking
Oh yeah,
post-breeding.
summer.
So you got that to look forward to.
Summer juvenile ratty
Bald cardinals and all sorts of stuff.
bald grackles and who knows what.
Tis the season. Tis the season. Enjoy it. All right, folks.
All
Thanks
right.
for joining us. We'll see you around.